made my first million off of this strategy, guys. This volume indicator will change your life. Once you start to apply the correct settings, get the correct order in which these work at, life changer. That I can promise you. I don't know. I'm really looking at this and I'm just like, this is looking good, man. This for gold is looking good. There is a massive imbalance over here. There's a massive imbalance. So that's definitely looking good for me personally. Personally, I'm looking at the volume at this level, right? So we're going to talk volume now. There is, this imbalance over here, And this is what I was talking about, there is this imbalance right over there, And for me, they haven't tapped into that yet. So if they were coming and they were going to tap into that imbalance, then some big news like today, it would make a lot of bloody sense. So you see that imbalance over there? Because you see they're already kind of like tapping into this level, kind of, But if you look carefully, there's this imbalance over here that was given, right? Then tapped into. Then you see this imbalance over here. You can see that they haven't tapped into it. They keep missing it. It's almost like they're staying below it so that when news comes out, you see definitely going to go bullish from here. Look at that. There's crazy imbalance over there from the buyers. So definitely buying imbalance on that candlestick over there. Massive buying imbalance. And they've been staying above that level. So they definitely granted that. They've already used that up. They use that to push price higher. But that imbalance is definitely looking good. Definitely looking good. So I'm looking at these levels, guys. I'm looking at these levels. I'm looking at 400, give or take. So there is a gap at this level. There is a gap at this level. I'm looking for price to obviously tap in. There is a gap at this level. You understand? There is a gap at this level. So definitely looking at that. So you see that gap? So I feel like today we need something to bounce off of, take this liquidity. So, we're taking these relatively equal highs, which is liquidity, coming into that imbalance and then closing the gap, closing this gap, but then finding a support at this level. That's what I am looking for today. This definitely looks good for me. I'm happy with that, I'm happy with, man, there's a lot of fair value at this. There's a lot of, they need to do, they really need to come and balance price. You understand? So it's not really about balancing price over here, but more balancing price over here and over here. But they need a push from somewhere, right? They need a push from somewhere. So they're definitely going to find that push somewhere up here. Well, I don't know if I'm going to be here to trade at 230. Might be here. Can't promise anything, but definitely looks good. And then looking at NASDAQ, since people want me to look at other places also. So NASDAQ, so here, again, there's a gap, right? So here on NAS, we definitely, so you must remember that if gold is dropping to find support, NAS is obviously pushing on higher. So if we don't have anything here, then yeah, we're definitely looking at NASDAQ creating a new high. So perhaps as you know, gold is going up before going down. So NAS is most likely to go down and fill that gap before going for a new high. So remember, we have this gap over here, and they are most likely to fill that gap. And I feel like if we can just find, just see if we're finding some volume at this level quickly. So here's the buyers support. So the buyers will find support at these levels. There are levels over here where the buyers would find support. So they'll definitely find support over here. They haven't been tapped into. That's a beautiful 4-hour imbalance. And as they come and close the gap, they will find support over here. So definitely NASDAQ going up after coming down. Whoa, yeah, no, definitely. So as you can see, they found some kind of support at this level. You can see that they found some kind of support at that level. Understand? Now, see, there's an imbalance over here, but this imbalance, but see, this is what I'm always talking about. You know, there's an imbalance, right? There's an imbalance over here, but you can't see the imbalance. The imbalance, it's showing you, right? So let me explain this to you, right? So we're seeing an imbalance. If we go to candles, there's this imbalance that sits at this level, right? There is this imbalance, right, that is sitting at this level, but there isn't an imbalance. I don't know if you get me. So it shows you, and it looks like there's an imbalance, but if you go deeper into the candles, your imbalance is actually just sitting over here. So the actual gap doesn't have an imbalance. You understand? The actual gap doesn't have an imbalance. And what they're doing is they are charging off of this level over here. So as you can see, the buyers were given fair value at this level. And it looks like they are using that right now. They are tapping into that level right now, that 4-hour fair value right over there. They're tapping into that. They're staying above that, which is obviously giving them that push. So I believe we would be looking at, I don't know how much more news is going to come out, but perhaps a push up before a push down, and then finding actual support. So they'll find actual support either at this level or at this level, right? Now, because if we understand structure, because they've broken this high, right? Because they've broken this high, right? The low, right? So understand this, when price put in a low, that low gets protected, all right? So even if they come over here, it makes sense for them to come and cover about 50% of this whole move, because if we understand structure, right, price put in this high before basically putting in that low, right, and then pushing on higher. So we've broken this level as a continuation to go higher. And that's my analysis for NASDAQ today. Okay. That's my analysis. I'm not saying, right, I'm not saying that they're going to find support today. I'm not saying that, right? They could still play at this level, right? Until we get news, which I don't know when is the next news. When is the next news? We've got that, right? We've got that today, and then it looks like there's this. Oh, so this is all today. Oh no. Big news coming out. Big news coming out. Big news coming out. Big moves happening. So definitely that being the situation. So perhaps the first batch of news would play around in this level. And then I feel like, what time is this coming out? Let's see. Later on in the evening, man. Later on in the evening, FOMC is going to do that. So during the day, we might see that. In the evening, we'll probably see that. And we'll probably start seeing a support level holding as price pushes on to the upside. All right, guys. So that's my analysis. That's my analyzing for NASDAQ, right? That's my analyzing for NASDAQ. US 30 is probably going to do the same if they do have a gap, right? So, like I said, overall, what we're looking at is we're just basically looking at that gap being filled. So they come and they balance some pricing at this level, come in, balance pricing, right? Continue lower, find some kind of support to then go higher. So they're obviously looking for a support to go higher. That's what they're basically looking for, right? We're looking for a support to go higher. We're definitely looking to break, right? We're definitely looking to break this high. And this kind of like looks like liquidity to me. So looking at these relatively equal highs over here. So relatively equal highs over here. Price to definitely come before anything and balance, you know, that imbalance before going higher. Okay. Now, because there's an imbalance over here, right? There's an imbalance over here. I don't think that they would leave that. So they'll probably come and balance price. There should be some kind of fair value gap over there. And price will then go higher, right? Now, why do I say this? Because you see, what happened was now, I mean, price could even come lower. Price could even sell off today, but that might be later, right? That might be later, right? And use this as liquidity, right? Relatively equal lows. We took that liquidity over there. This low created this high. This high couldn't take that high. So the high, right? To understand this, the low that created this high created this low. This low created this high. This high failed to take this high, which means that we could see price taking this low. Now, that may not always be the case, but very often that does happen. Okay. Now, again, right? Again, this may not be the end of the move yet, right? Because we're still sitting at a premium level, right? We're still sitting at a premium level, right? So one thing they don't want to do, right, is buy at a premium level. Okay. All right. They want to buy at a discounted level. So they definitely want to buy here instead of buying over here. So this move wouldn't be over, right? So this could still be one move, even if it looked like that. Just like this had multiple moves, that had multiple moves. We would use this high and this low as one move, okay? We would use this low and perhaps even this high as one move, all right? So that's one thing you got to understand about structure, is that what we're seeing over here is not going to be the same as what we're going to be seeing on the higher time frame, all right? So if I go to a higher time frame, just put this into practice here quickly, so you guys can see what I'm talking about. If I go into a higher time frame, if I go to the daily time frame, you can see that that just looks like one move. So once they come and balance price over here, it will still be that one move, just like we saw that one move. You know, this right now could be considered one move. Always understand that there is someone bigger. Now, like I said, gold going up from that support level, meaning that your dollar is losing. So we're starting to lose power on the dollar, which means that if we're losing power on the dollar, then people are starting to buy what? Investors are starting to buy what? Gold. So we're most likely to see gold start to trend higher, which means that your NASDAQ and your US 30 are supposed to what? Trend lower. So the dollar, right? The dollar gets weaker, gold goes higher. The dollar, right? The dollar gets stronger, right? NASDAQ and US 30 goes higher, but gold drops. Okay. So if they're not buying NASDAQ stocks, or they're not buying US 30 stocks, right? Then they are buying gold. And if they're not buying gold, right, and the price of gold is dropping, it means that the dollar is strong. When the dollar is strong, gold drops. Okay, gold drops. That's why when you see this war going on with Iran, right, and all this conflict going on, and you see, the oil prices skyrocketing, right, the dollar is getting stronger. Okay, the dollar is doing what? Getting stronger. That's why we've been seeing NASDAQ going higher. Sorry. I'm bullshitting you. The dollar is getting weaker. Oh my gosh, what am I saying? The dollar gets weaker, right? So that's why they're trying to stop this war, right? They're trying to stop this war because if people, right, if people are focusing on oil, right, and trying to adjust the price of oil, they're kind of neglecting everything else. You understand? They're neglecting gold. The investors aren't looking at gold. They're focusing more on, trying to balance oil prices, right? And the stock market for the oil prices is what they're buying into. So in order to get them away from that, well, we need, something to give, and that is obviously people buying into gold or stocks. All right. That was a mouth handful. I get it. But again, right, you can clearly see that the day definitely looks bearish. We definitely look bearish. We definitely look like we want to fill this gap over here. Now, if you look carefully, there's this gap over there, right? So there's a gap over here. So this is definitely one of those moments where you find a supply zone, right, testing and becoming a support zone, right? So perhaps, like I said, we're finding that support and then going higher, which means gold goes lower. So that's definitely what I'm seeing NASDAQ doing. So during the day, price going lower before going higher, before later on going lower and probably filling this gap. Or maybe even during the first breaking news that comes out, price coming to fill that gap, and then maybe later FOMC pushing it higher. But back to gold. Gold is definitely looks like it wants to short. Definitely going to want to short gold. As you can see, right? As you can see, there's that. We've got a massive imbalance at this level, guys. You must understand, right? We must take into consideration that there is a massive, right? A massive imbalance at this level. Okay, massive imbalance, right? So if you look over here, right, price hasn't tapped into this level. Okay, so this was an imbalance for the sellers, and we see price not tapping into that level yet, right? So price hasn't tapped into that level. Okay, price hasn't tapped into that level, and now we are offering the buyers and the sellers fair value at this level. Now, either what's going to happen, right, is the sellers are going to stay below this imbalance so that they can come in and use that as a support to then push down, right, giving buyers a level for resistance, right, so that the buyers can push higher. But you see, when price stays below that imbalance, we're going to give that resistance to the sellers, which gives the sellers a support to push price lower. Okay, so the buyers will reflect off of this level. So either the sellers So basically, you could expect the sellers to use this level before buyers finding support and sellers then finding a resistance to then push price lower. So this level, so this basically looking what? This looking as per se in regards to what I'm looking at today. All right. So again, understanding there's an imbalance within an imbalance. So as you can see, there's a consolidation taking place over here, a quick manipulation of that consolidation, right? Quick manipulation of that consolidation. You understand? Again, maybe an order block. People would say this was an order block, right? So as you can see over here, right, we have this order block, price breaking through that level, right? And then if you look carefully, right, overall, people using supply, support, and resistance, whatever the case is, are going to use these same levels. The only difference is they're going to use them differently. So they're going to use this level, right? So we're looking at this as an order block, or sorry, that as an order block, but we're breaking price at this level. So we're using this as a supply zone, right? So if price breaks up, price pushes higher. But otherwise, we're using that as a resistance level if the sellers decide to come in. Now, look at this. If we're just going to use this level, we're already getting both these levels within one level. And perhaps this being that resistance level, right? Closing this gap, and then price pushing higher. Okay, so I do see gold finding some support soon, definitely, very soon. Very soon, I do see gold finding support. Okay, I see that. You see, they've taken this low, they've taken this low, right? Now, for them to find support would make sense, okay? And then probably find support again and continue going higher, right? Because overall, right, gold is still bullish. We haven't taken that low. This low has created that high, so we haven't taken this low. So as long as we haven't taken this low, right, gold is still what? Bullish. Okay, so we're definitely looking to find some kind of support level, right over here. Okay, some kind of support to then push price high. Now, I'm not saying price is going to go for a new high. No, right? I'm not saying that. What I am saying is, though, we are going to find some kind of support. Okay, we are going to find some kind of support, and the most important thing is understanding where we're going to find that support. So you need to always understand that they are, right, big fish in this pond, or in the sea, if you want to call it that, right? And they've strategically placed, limit orders at certain levels, right? Now, us figuring out those levels, right, is the key to all of this. Now, once you start to understand, right, once you start to understand certain things, right, so if I were to understand this, right, and everybody who's done, right, everybody who's done the scalping strategy would know that we're getting exactly the scalping strategy right here. So if I were to take my fib, right, those who know we would take it from there to there, and price coming up to our 25 or our 75 level, is what we want from this. Now, does this line up? 100%. Okay. So those who know. And like I said, we're looking at a level over here of an imbalance, right? Now, imbalance is what pushes price to go lower, right? They're balancing price. Now, if you look carefully, we have this imbalance for the sellers, right? So obviously you can see that we used this imbalance and price tapped into that level and pushed itself lower, right? So we won't look at that level again, but what we will do is look at this level, and this is where the scalping strategy will come into play. So if we look at that level, right, you can clearly see that price hasn't tapped into that level. This is where our 75 level is at. Now, what else do we get over here? Well, we get gold. Now you can see that if you look over here, there was an imbalance over here, but price used that level. So if you look carefully, right, I'm going to quickly go over that again. So here there's an imbalance, and you can see that that was given to the sellers, and the sellers then came back into this level, pushed down, came back into this level again, and pushed down. So that imbalance was used. Okay. However, though, this imbalance says, but price can't stay above them, right? Then those imbalances also become a defense weapon, right? Those imbalances also become a what? Defense weapon. And as you can see, this is the same level, right, in where your session would take place. So I'll explain this to you quickly, right? So when buyers stay above an imbalance, right? When buyers stay above an imbalance, right? So if they give an imbalance, right? So if they are given a chance to use a level, right, as a support level to take price higher, they need to stay above that level. They need to show strength that they are able to push price higher. So here's an example. Here's a candle, buyers versus sellers, right? Imbalance to sellers, right? On this candle, right? So you can see that there's no imbalance, right? Then at this candle, imbalance to the sellers. Now, if we clearly mark that out like we did, you can see that price tapped in, came down. Tapped in, the buyers tapped in, got rejected. They tapped in again, and they were able to then push price all the way back down. Okay? Now, this level is done. Okay? Now, if you look carefully, there was then this level. Now, this level, nothing happened. Okay? The sellers were able to stay below that level. Price stays below. And now we're almost at a consolidation. And this is the level that we want to see price tapping into. Okay? So for Sasha, I mean, not for Sasha, sorry, for the scalping strategy, this would be the level that we want to see price tapping into. We have an imbalance. What's the difference between this imbalance and this imbalance? Let me explain. Right? Price stayed below that imbalance, closed. Very important. Price must close below the imbalance, right? Because then they're showing that they can handle, right, selling pressure. So this being an imbalance to the who? The sellers. Okay, so them closing below this level means that they have an advantage to now use this level as a resistance. Okay, so this candle, buyers were no longer available. You could see that it's 0, 0. You can see that the sellers, in regards to numbers, were doing much larger numbers. Okay, much larger numbers, which means that the sellers dominated. And if the sellers are dominating, they will then use that level as a resistance, and we then see price going lower. Now, if we look carefully, right, you can see that this level, again, right over here, they used it, right, stayed below it, and that could also be a level that price could use to go lower. Okay, so basically what we have, right, are all these levels that price is using as a what? As a defense mechanism, right, for them to then push price lower. So perhaps a run on that liquidity and then a push lower. Now this could be the move. This could definitely be a move for today. I'm not saying that they're going to go all the way up here. What I am saying, though, is they're definitely going to find a resistance to come close this gap, right? Before the buyers find that support. Now, that support is very important because that support is extremely strong. And you can see that the buyers have major support at this level. And they've stayed above this level. So they've definitely got support. And they're most likely to definitely find support at that level. So that's how we use a simple tool like this, right? It shows us, you know, deeper, much deeper data than you could ever expect. Okay? Much deeper data than you could ever expect. All right. Now, for those asking about ICT concepts and how can we use that, something like an order block. Okay, so let's go back to candles and let's say, okay, fine, right? We have this support level, which is most likely to turn into a resistance, which it did over here. Price used that order block and pushed price lower. Great. So this order block has been, well, price is tapped into that level, right? Now, the true question is, why did price, right, tap back into this level? Now, this is what I'm talking about when we say we go deeper into the data. Okay, we go deeper. So you only see, right, like I was saying, right, that's your order block. We could also say that price came in and we use this level as a resistance to push price lower. We can say whatever we want, right? But at the end of the day, if we're going to use ICT concepts, then that is an order block. We then violate this low, right? So once again, we violate this low, okay? We violate this low, which validates this as an order block. Now, the truth of the matter is, why is price tapping back into this level? Now, I'm going to tell you why ICT concepts just are basically stolen concepts from people like Wyckoff and Dow theory. And okay, but anyway, right? So if we look, right, let's look at something else. This low was violated, right? Making this an order block. Now, you can see that price taps into this level, just barely taps into this level, right? But you see, when you start to understand, right, when you start to understand that price isn't really tapping into some block that has major orders. That's not the truth, okay? Let me expose this quickly, right? So the truth of the matter is that there is a fair value gap, right? They are coming to balance price. Once they've balanced price, they have no business there. So they move away to do what? Balance price. Okay. So I'm going to let you in on a little secret here, right? All they do, right, is balance price. That's all they do, right? When they go higher and they say, yeah, there were orders sitting at this level. No, 100%, 100%, right? But all they're doing is balancing price. And I'm going to show you that, right? So if you look over here, look at the level at which they came into. Just so I can show you precisely what they're doing, right? This becomes buying imbalance. Now watch this. The sellers are able to stay below that. Then the sellers get a chance, and right over here, they don't tap into this level. But let's leave that level there. Then we get an imbalance over here that the sellers continues to stay what? Below. Now they use this imbalance. You can see that price comes in, they use that imbalance and price goes lower, right? However, though, this imbalance and this imbalance, so these imbalances, price is staying below. So the imbalance is then offered to them. Now watch this precise entry so I can show you that I can prove it. So look at that level. Let's go a little deeper. So that's the volume for all of this. However, though, what happens if we only took a level like that, right? So we don't take the whole level. We take this level because this level, you can see at this level, there was nobody really pushing. But at this level, right? At this level, you could see that this is where majority were pushing from, right? And then all of a sudden, we're giving fair value to both sides, meaning that this is a strong fair value gap, right? There's a level where they are strong at, they're both leaving fair value, but the sellers are dominating because they're staying below, whereas the buyers aren't staying above. Now, is this a coincidence? No, it's not a coincidence. That's a precise entry. That is a precise entry on why they came to that level. We've sorted that level out. How about we look at this level? Okay. Everybody would be like, fair value gap. But they kind of like tapped into this more than they tapped into the fair value gap. Now, they tapped into this candle more than they did the fair value gap. Let's be honest. So let's take this with the fair value gap, and you can see that they mostly tapped into that, right? Just barely, but they did. Okay. Now let's look at the reasoning behind why they're tapping into this level. So if you look carefully, there is an imbalance that price has not used. Look at that. Okay. I want to show you something. So price taps into this level. You can see that right over there. Price uses this level, the sellers tap into that level and they push price lower, right? Then we tap into this level. Now you can see price doesn't tap into that level until they do. Now, is it a coincidence? No, it's not. Okay, that's a precise entry. Okay, so when I challenge it, we can challenge it all day. I can show you this all day, right? Your order blocks, your fair value gaps, your so-called liquidity, they are balancing price. Too many sellers in the market. You understand? Maybe an iceberg order that went off, right? And then you'll find out that that iceberg order went off just to show you this move, just to show you this pricing going lower. And then they have to come back in here because they pulled out of all their positions at this level, right? So at first, this had 15 billion contracts. Then it only had 5 million contracts. Well, that's not fair. There was an illusion taking place that this was a move that pushed price lower. There was big volume over here, right? And in the beginning, there was big volume until they pulled out, right? So they only used this level to trigger contracts to get people involved to push price lower, right? before coming back there and filling in contracts to then continue to push price even lower. Make sense? Is that making sense? You must remember that with an iceberg, right, you can't see what's happening. You can't see what's happening with an iceberg order. They will show you that there's 2,000 contracts, but there's 2,000 times 2,000. The difference is that they piled on top of each other. You can only see the front. You can't see all the contracts that are behind it. That's an iceberg order. Okay. Now, again, I can show you this multiple times, right? Why is price tapping into this level? Okay. So let's mark this fair value gap out, right? So let's mark this fair value gap out. And then look at why is price tapping into these levels. So if we go to this volume indicator, will change your life. Once you start to, apply the correct settings, get the correct order in which these work at, life changer. That I can promise you. Okay. Now you can see that most of the volume came from this level, right? But the fair value, where there needs to be a balancing of price, needs to take place over here. Okay. Now you can clearly see, right, that at this level, they use this level. You think that's a coincidence? There were all the buyers and all the sellers at this level. And you can clearly see the numbers from 3,000, then 20,000, 26,000, 8,000, then back to weak buying. Okay. So you can clearly see that the sellers are in charge here, right? The sellers sitting at this level, pushing price lower. Now the buyers, it shows you that the buyers are stronger than the sellers at this level, but you only find out that the buyers look stronger. That's because the sellers are absorbing the buyers. Okay. They're taking in all the orders the buyers are putting in, right? They're not being triggered. They're not triggering their orders, right? So the sellers, right, you can see that price taps in to that level over there. So let me quickly go to candles. So you can see that precise entry right over there. Okay, precise entry right over there, and price pushes lower. Now, there is a fair value level that price then uses to push even lower. So look at this level, and I'm going to show you why this indicator is boss. So there is selling volume, right? Selling imbalance all the way from there to here, right? But let's look at this level here. Selling imbalance. And I'm expecting when price comes back to this level, right? Price stays below this level, but when price comes back to this level, it's a trigger to go lower. So I'm looking for that imbalance at this level, price to come back into that level, and it should trigger. Look at them consolidating at that level. Look at them consolidating at that level. Now, obviously, you saw that there was a higher imbalance that we didn't take. That price would have tapped into for both of these levels. Now, you think that's a coincidence that they actually consolidating at exactly that level? I don't know what MXM is, but you guys are going to get so confused with all these concepts. MXM, order blocks. Guys, I've stopped that, right? I've been picking up massive trades. Been picking up massive trades just using simple volume. It's all I'm using here, volume. I'm understanding structure. I'm understanding, right, support versus resistance, which is taking place over here. Now, to me, it's one of those, okay, fine. Remember, we want to definitely come back into that fair value gap. There's a fair value gap over here that I told you about, remember? Right over here, right? So we see a support turning into resistance for price to go lower. No, 100%, right? 100%. we clear that gap, price finds some kind of support at this level, as we saw earlier. And because we've already found support at this level, we're most likely to find support again. Simple understanding of why this would happen. And because there's breaking news coming out, some serious news coming out, actually, right? We have the mom, and we also have FOMC, right? So definitely is where I see price wanting to go, 100%. I'm not even going to question this, okay? Now, news coming out at 2:30, let's see what happens. But for me personally, right now, I just see some kind of movement into that fair value gap. So I want to see this level being tapped into. We haven't tapped into this level. I definitely see price coming to this level. Now, a lot of people will be like, yeah, bro, but there's liquidity above that level. Sure, 100%. I agree with you. There were orders. I mean, people, this level would turn into resistance because there are orders at this level. No, 100%. But the orders are sitting at a level in which was faked. So there were orders that price pushed down from, right? So think about it like this. People who can see this, see that. So let's go to something like this, right? We can see all the orders. I use this for Bitcoin, right? We can see all the orders. We can also see iceberg orders, right? We can see everything going on. It's not like we can't, right? We can see everything going on. We can see where all the volume is sitting. We can see that majority of these guys are putting in orders and pulling out, okay? These 0.0000000 are buy orders, right? That are literally just sitting there waiting to be triggered, okay? Okay, all of these, right, are orders that are still waiting to be triggered, right? Okay, so these are not aggressive buyers or sellers, right? These are orders, right, waiting to be what? Triggered. Cool. Now, this is what's happening over here. There are orders at this level waiting to be triggered, but it's this over here that is empty. Now, understand what I'm talking about when I say empty. It means that a whole lot of sellers got involved at that level, and they were pushing price lower, right? And as they pushed price lower, they pulled out of their position. So we see this massive spike to the downside, but there's no orders sitting at that level. It's at that level, right, where price is not balanced, right? Price is not balanced. So you can clearly see what happened over here. We had this consolidation. Some kind of manipulation. And then if you really want to call it a distribution, sure. Or some would say we had a consolidation, a manipulation, right? And then a manipulation to the upside before a distribution, which is fair. Now, what do we have over here? We have the same thing taking place. We have this consolidation. So let's say this is the consolidation. So obviously we're looking for some kind of manipulation and then a distribution before price finds the support to push itself higher. Now I'm getting all of this just from volume. I'm not looking at the order blocks, right? I might be looking at the power of 3 here, which is fine, right? But at the end of the day, this is what I'm looking at. So I am most likely to find some kind of level for price to come back to. So I'm most likely to sell at that level. So let's go to the 4 hour. So I'm definitely looking at selling as price comes. Can't even see what's happening here, but then, so definitely phone, right? So there they are. That was, my signal in the signal group. Hit all three TPs, loving it. Loving it. All three TPs fucking smashed right there. There we go, baby. There we go. There we go. There we go. All three TPs hit. If you're in the signal group, you know, man, we just smashed all three TPs again, just like we did yesterday. Let's go, baby. Yeah. If you know, you know. If you know, you know. I'm so excited when my signals go accordingly, man, because like that's all I want. I want the boys to be making cash, bro, making money, setting themselves financially free, man. That's what it's about for me, man. I even that's one thing about me, right? You can see I'm always giving them advice. You know, if a signal doesn't go according to plan and hits SL, you will lose the 10K. So I was basically saying, if you trade 10K, right? If you're in my signal group, you know this, man. If you trade 10K, right? If you have a 10K account, right, and you win 2,000, right, on that trade, you can risk and make your SL a 2,000 risk to reward, so that we break even, we don't lose money, right? But if that signal goes accordingly, you make another 2,000 rand. Now you've got 4,000 rand, which means that your risk to reward can be of 2,000 rand. Okay, so you're only risking 2,000 rand, but you've made 4,000 rand. So even if you lose that 2,000 rand, you've still made 2,000. Okay, that's the type of stuff that I give up in the signals, man. I tell these people, so something as simple as 1,000 pips gets you about 1,000 rand with brokers, right? On the smallest lot, right? With a 10,000 account, you can make 1,000 a day. With a 5,000 account, you can still make 1,000 a day. Don't be greedy. The bigger the account, the more you will make. It's as simple as that. But greed will kill you in this industry. Greed will kill you in this industry, right? Now, 1,000 rand a day, think about this. 1,000 rand in a day, take away the weekends, is 24 days. That's 24,000 rand. You didn't have that 24,000 rand. Majority of the time, right, I would say signals, look, to be safe and fair, 85% of the time those signals hit, I'll take profits. Great. Okay. But also, right, also, even if you're winning 15, 20 out of those 24, that's 20,000, that's 15,000 you didn't have. And it costs you what, 950 to renew it every month? Come on, man. That's an investment. Okay? Okay. That's an investment. Right? And for those who think that I use a broker, you guys go and register with this broker. Oh, click my link. What is the win rate of the butterfly strategy? Oh, the butterfly strategy is crazy. The reason I called it, so at first it was a butterfly strategy, and then I made my first million, and then I just named it Sasha, because, like, come on, made my first million off of this strategy, guys. So there's no way I wasn't going to call it after myself. What do you think about the auction market theory? Oh no, 100%. It's beautiful. The question is, what tools are you using? I know there's a lot of you here that are using Sasha. So let's be honest. How's Sasha? If you're using the butterfly strategy, tell everybody how it is. People get upset with me. They're like, and that's why I'm going to charge 3,500 for Sasha, because it's a whole different level of strategy, right? But my thing is that, you know, it's a strategy that works. It's a strategy that I took away, right? Because I thought that they were going to manipulate it, right? I thought that sooner or later we'll get onto YouTube. Everybody's going to want it, right? How long will it take to be profitable using it? It's such an easy strategy, man. It's such an easy strategy. If you can just understand bloody structure, that strategy is gone. That's it. You just need to understand structure. You don't need to understand order blocks. You don't need to understand any of that other shit. You just need structure, basically. Now, I like using the strategy. Like on the bigger time frame, that's great. 100%, that's great. But I prefer using it on the smaller time frame. I like it on the smaller time. I love it on the 1 minutes. I love it on the 5 minute, on the 15-minute. Man, this thing is crazy. So I'm not going to tell you what to look for, but I'm going to show it to you. So those who know, we have a Sasha right there. So let's go into a replay tool. Here we had Sasha. For beginner, any, but I don't do the scalping strategy anymore. I left it. It's over. Yep, there it is. There it is. There's Sasha. Boom. Sasha confirms itself. Rah. We enter here. We enter here to the next low. See what happens. Even though price goes out, that's fine. We had Sasha here too. We have Sasha here again.